Good evening. Tonight, the Guild of Strangeness finally heads north. They've been exploring the scorching equatorial grasslands for a few days, and frankly, there's just not much here. The four night creatures want to see the Dwarven civilization in the northern mountains. But before they can reach the relative safety of Dwarven lands, they'll need to traverse the territories of the goblins. The goblins of the Fell Witch have control of the swampy lands between here and the mountains. The next leg of our journey could be a perilous one. The first sight the four come across is a dark pit. The Goblin Dark Pits of Seduced Beetles. This place was apparently conquered by the dwarves of Chanted Finns some time ago, so there shouldn't be any goblin soldiers here. It's night, but these adventurers aren't afraid of the dark. It seems they are greatly inconvenienced by it, though. They can't actually see much as they try to crawl through the trenches without any sunlight. Eventually, they get fed up with tripping in the mud and decide to come back in the morning. The group decides to try sleeping. They've never actually done it before. These night creatures were created mere days ago through necromancer experimentation, and have not yet felt any urges to sleep, eat, or drink. It's looking like they have no such mortal needs. But the four of them have nothing to do, and maybe sleep will feel reinvigorating, even if it is unnecessary. Morning breaks. The four feel about the same as they did before going to sleep. The whole practice just kinda seems like a waste of time. Since none of these creatures have any bodily needs, they decide to drop all their food and water. It seems to just be weighing them down. Much better. What a load off. While the group is busy rearranging their possessions, Udil's war rhinoceros gets himself into a little trouble. This rhino has somehow managed to climb up a tree. We don't know why those Chanted Finns animal trainers were teaching these rhinos to climb trees, but there's no denying that they did an impressive job. Udil somehow manages to coax the creature down from the branches, and they all head back into the dark pits. The area does seem pretty deserted, but what's this? Beside the river here, there's a goblin lady, a noble. She's entirely naked, hardly seems ladylike. Greetings, my name is Rovand Mylash. Maybe she's embarrassed, being undressed and all. Kosoth has no eyes, so perhaps the goblin will be more comfortable talking to her.
I am Kosoth.
Nothing. What's this lady's deal? Maybe we caught her doing something weird. Let's just leave her to it. If she wants to skinny dip next to some abandoned pits, that's her business. Who are we to question the habits of the nobles? The four continue downstream. The terrain becomes more desert-like. It looks like these dark pits were built in the middle of a pretty complex river system. An oasis of sorts. Wouldn't want to be in one of those trenches when it floods, though. Further on, two rivers combine and drop into a small canyon. There's an impressive waterfall here. They come to a place where the terrain allows them to lead their animals across the water. Getting the rhinos to cross a river is not an entirely simple task, but they manage. Throughout the dark pits, the group finds many goblin corpses, all that remains of the prior denizens after the attacks by the dwarves. We finally come across some actual structures. Stone watchtowers, seemingly all deserted. Yes, there's not much of interest here. The four leave the dark pits and head off into the desert. As they continue north, they find more abandoned goblin settlements. These are the dark pits of Fat Poison, another conquest of Chanted Finns. They're mostly deserted. But not entirely. We managed to actually find several goblins. They're all monks, and they're all naked. These goblins! They're more personable than the goblin lady, though. We aren't sure what they're doing in these trenches, but they do share an interesting rumor with us. It is said that the Fell Witch goblins are led by a monstrous ruler. The Pig Fiend, Aslot Nightmare Glistened, the Impervious. This porcine demon, raised from the underworld itself, has lost something. An artifact copper cap, illness smashed, the quietness of barbarians. It was taken by the dwarves of the Whiskered Tool, and now resides in their capital city, Sneak Shields. Aslot wants this treasure returned to his seat of power, the dark fortress of Bulb menaced. It is an intriguing opportunity. Since we are citizens of the Whiskered Tool, we wouldn't have any trouble gaining access to the capital. We might be able to steal it back. But our previous encounters with goblin soldiers haven't been entirely pleasant, and consorting with demons seems like a pretty risky business. We'll consider it, but it kinda seems like a bad idea. This dark pit doesn't seem much more interesting than the first. These trenches are pretty annoying to traverse too. Let's move along. On the outskirts of the pits, there are some campfires and tents set up. Looks like some group of people is camped out here. In one of the tents, we find a few goblin civilians, animal caretakers, dissectors, working folk. They say they're traveling because danger threatens their home. These people are probably former residents of the dark pits we just left, now refugees after their home was razed to the ground. The armies of Chanted Fins have certainly disrupted life out here. The camp is pretty large, plenty of downtrodden refugees milling about. The group eventually finds a lord, Ep3 Aguzbu. We inquire about this warfare with the dwarves, and he says something interesting.
The Ship of Saints is not at war with us, but there is ill will between our peoples. The trouble started because of a dispute over the treatment of animals.
There's tension between these refugees and the dwarves of Chanted Fins because of a disagreement over animals? How utterly bizarre. Chanted Fins did use war dogs when raiding the goblin settlements. Maybe the goblins took issue with the use of animals in warfare. It seems fair to protest having your family ripped apart by warhounds. Anyway, there's not much we can do for these people. We make our excuses and move along. As we penetrate deeper into goblin lands, we approach the second necromancer tower, Tubes allied. It's on the way, so we might as well stop by. This tower is at the top of a hill. As we climb towards it, the terrain once again changes into a dead wasteland. These towers have a habit of killing off the surrounding plant life. Night falls just as we reach the outskirts of the settlement. The group decides to wait out the night before entering the tower. It will be safer come light of day. Rovod takes out one of his blank scrolls, and by the glow of the campfire, starts writing. The reptilian author titles this document, A Course on the Dwarf. It concerns a group of necromancers, called the Crystalline Snarls, from the eastern side of the Folded Continents. This chronicle is a great source of information. Each of its 5 chapters tells of a different conquest by the necromancers of the tower. An interesting read, though not very useful to us right now. The Crystalline Snarls and their spoils of war are half a continent away. We need to focus on the Necromancer Tower right in front of us. This place should belong to the dwarves and be free of any hostile undead. But the last tower we visited housed a once resting one. She wasn't hostile to us, though we don't know if we'll be so lucky this time. We reach the outskirts of the tower. Outside the first building, we see a dwarf. He's crawling on the ground, though he seems uninjured. He says he's the Master Einod Bomrakos. He's from Chanted Fins. It seems he was sent by the dwarves to rule over this tower once the necromancers were driven off. Looks like things aren't going too well for him. He says his people are abandoning this site. Perhaps someone else has taken control? Looks like sending a single dwarf to defend an entire necromancer tower didn't turn out so well. We should stay on our toes. Who knows what foul folk might reside here now? The 4 don't find anything else worthwhile in the barrows. It's time to head to the tower itself. It's another dark, abandoned necromancer tower. This time we actually find a book. It's simply titled Dive. Rovod fingers through the 111-page tome, but it's basically a meaningless rant. He finds another scroll, titled The Plane of Mornings Understood. It tells the story of how a necromancer raised a human as a fallen stalker. The content is interesting, but it's not particularly well written. But again, this tower is pretty much abandoned, and there's really nothing valuable in the area. For all Zasit's talk of uniting the necromancer towers and creating a necromancer empire, it looks like all she's done is clear out the towers and kill everyone inside, for better or for worse. This leads to something of a philosophical discussion among the group.
Don't get me wrong, strength in combat is certainly commendable. A skilled warrior is a beautiful sight to behold.
That's true.
The world is better off with a bit of commotion.
Hang on, Kosoth. The mind thinks best when the world is at rest. Tranquility is among the highest ideals. All this warfare the dwarves are taking part in, it adds chaos and strife to the world, which is always a shame. Wouldn't you agree, Rovad?
No, Kosoth's right. A balance of commotion and tranquility is important. Without conflict, there would be no warriors in the first place.
Odom, you're the odd one out here. What's life without a little excitement now and again? A world without chaos wouldn't be one worth exploring.
Looks like Odom is just going to have to agree to disagree.
Still, Odom can't stop thinking about all those refugees.
Hell. Maybe we can't do anything about the war, but I bet there's still some way we can help these people. Odom convinces the group to double back towards the refugee camp. It's not too far anyway. Back at the camp, Odom tries to figure out how we can help. Asking around, he finds they've been terrorized by a great beast. The giant, Control Taker the Confident, has killed 22 people in his lust for murder. The fiend resides in a lair just north of here. This is exactly what we were looking for, a chance to help these folks, and prove our worth in combat. They set off north to slay a giant. They were told the giant's lair is in the Routed Swamps. Sure enough, the four find a cave entrance in the wetlands. Seems like a tight squeeze for a giant. Kosoth leads the way. There he is, Control Taker the Confident. He crawls across a pile of bones and discarded clothing from his victims.
Whoever would blight the world, preying on the helpless, fear me. I will slay you where you stand. What is this madness?
And so the fight begins. It's a very cramped place to fight a giant. Udil hacks the beast in the arm with her axe. Rovad stabs him in the hand with his artifact spear, chipping the bone, tearing a ligament, and tearing a tendon. Kosoth bites the giant in the leg, fracturing the bone. It's one hell of a set of teeth on her. Odom slashes at the giant with his short sword. Even the rhinos get some hits in, goring the giant with their horns. Control Taker the Confident isn't doing so hot. He takes out a bow and bashes Kosoth with it, bruising her neck. But that's not going to slow her down. Kosoth takes a mighty swing with her left fist, and knocks the giant out with a punch to the head. With the giant unconscious, Kosoth bucks him in the head with her horns, chipping the skull and bruising the brain. The giant has been struck down. What an invigorating fight. The group is emboldened by their victory here. They find some loot in the cave. Some of the clothing here is valuable, decorated with gemstones. Rovad collects a hood and a cape for himself, while Odom grabs the giant's bow. It looks like a wooden elven weapon, featuring some wood decorations. Seems very old. Perhaps this item has a story to tell. But for now, there's still work to be done. We need to be able to prove we killed the creature. Odom takes out his blade and gets to work on the corpse. After much butchering, he has finally separated the skull from the rest of the body. This colossal chunk of bone is far too heavy to carry, for everyone except Kosoth. She lifts it like it's nothing. And so it's back down south to tell the refugees of our great feat. We arrive at the camp as night falls, so we wait until morning before approaching the Lord.
Behold, the remains of Control Taker the Confident. Not one day ago, I slew the giant with the help of my companions. He will terrorize your people no longer.
You are a legendary hero. We cannot thank you enough for your great acts of bravery. With this beast gone, our people will rest more easily at night.
I couldn't have done it without the others. Cooperation is important.
I prefer to work alone myself.
Well, in any case, we've done what we came here to do. It's time to continue on north. The rest of this region is wholly owned by the goblins. No more conquered dark pits in sight. There's no knowing how amenable to outsiders the goblin settlements will be, especially if they realize we're from Chanted Fins. But perhaps we can find some common ground with these people. We've had our conflicts with the goblins, but we've seen today that peaceful encounters with the green folk are possible. The four travelers set off north, deeper into goblin lands, unsure whether they're heading towards friends or foes. But It's getting late, and I must retire. Come find me again some other night, to hear more tales from the Guild of Strangeness on their perilous journey.